and prescriptions start to get written for these drugs.
Welcome back. You're watching the Econ TV, episode number 8, and just a few minutes ago, one of our guests just joined us. Her name is Jennifer. Jennifer, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
And I understand you were minor in psychology at school.
Yes, I do have a minor in psychology, and one thing that I wanted to add is that when I was coming up through the minor program in psychology, one thing that they always told us was that it's so much better to counsel a person, and that more of those people, if you just listen to them and let them tell you about their problem and you give them feedback, that heals or helps more people than what the drugs do. And from what my understanding and my training was within the realm of psychology is, by the time a person gets to the psychiatrist, that's supposed to be a lot of times the last leg. Not always. Sometimes the psychiatrist will sit down and talk to people, but for the most part, psychiatrists are there to prescribe drugs. Supposedly, people are supposed to go through counseling and go through a psychologist and then get referred, or a counselor and then get referred to a psychiatrist, and then the psychiatrist prescribes them drugs. But so many times people are pushed through those channels and just automatically prescribed medicine, just like what the videos are saying.
Yes. And by the way, the name of the video that you were just watching is Making a Killing, an untold story of psychotropic drugs. I believe that clip has been played on Channel 4 and 24 so many times. It's a wonderful clip. You can just look for it on Google and also YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube and also look for it and buy the DVD, and you can get more information about it. Any other comment on that, on the clip, Jim? Anything that there?
Couple things I wanted to point out. There's a sister documentary called Psychiatry and Industry of Death,
Yes.
which is very good also. I wanted to say that, drug companies spend a lot of money for retreats where the people go and learn about these wonder drugs for treating every single disease under the sun. They're also kind of testing and using people to test on people. They push it through the FDA. And the other thing is the FDA is like a revolving door. You go work on the FDA board, and then you go back to the company that you were work on, the pharmaceutical company. So it's kind of like these people that are sitting on the boards to approve drugs are going to go back to making multi-million-dollar incomes.
And that's a conflict of interest right there.
It is.
And they don't really pay attention to that. Most people don't pay attention to that, but it is a conflict of interest. And go on.
Well, another thing I was going to add is a lot of these there are a lot of pharmaceutical reps out there, and if someone doesn't know what a pharmaceutical rep is, let me just go ahead and define that. A pharmaceutical rep is someone who goes around to different doctors' offices and trying to talk different doctors into prescribing different types of drugs for their patients. So you might have a pharmaceutical representative that has this list of drugs that they're trying to sell, and so what they do is they spend a lot of money taking these doctors out to eat and convincing the doctors why their medication is good, and it convinces these doctors to, when you see someone with these symptoms, to prescribe this drug. And there are a lot of people out there who make a lot of money in the business of pharmaceutical rep.
Yes.
And not that those people are bad altogether. I have cousins that are pharmaceutical representatives. But this is just one aspect of the industry that I don't think a lot of people think of.
Yes.
And also, if you ever sit down in a doctor's office and you see the folds that they have out, the trifolds for these drugs, that was put there by a pharmaceutical representative. And there are huge companies, and there's just a lot of money in that. And there's a push for some drugs, and that doesn't just go for psychiatric drugs. That goes for drugs across the board. But it certainly would apply to the psychiatric drugs, absolutely, in my opinion.
Yes, Jim, go ahead.
I do have a kind of an ongoing thought, and this has been an attitude of mine for years, that we are not only over-drugged, but we're over-psychologized, in the sense well, I have a doctor friend who has been going to a psychiatrist or psychologist, I believe a psychiatrist, 3 times a week for years and years and years. Now, she has a mental disorder, there's no doubt about it. But isn't there a point at which this terminates? It's like, what would people do without the money to if they didn't have the money to go to these, to be treated by professional psychologists and psychiatrists? There's an organization that has been around for 60, 70 years now, and I was trained in it. It's called Reevaluation Co-Counseling, and it involves very little money. There's a minor payment that you make to get trained, and what happens in reevaluation co-counseling is 2 people, preferably strangers in the group, choose to co-counsel one another, and they set aside X amount of time a week, let's say an hour a week, and one of them talks to the other for half an hour, and the other one talks to the other for a half an hour, and there's an amazing, I'm not going to say success rate, but there's just an amazing health rate in terms of we don't need all this professional medical crap. We can do it. We can do a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it ourselves.
Yes.
And I think there's certainly a lot to that. And another thing that I wanted to point out, coming from the church world, a lot of this counseling used to be done by pastors and pastors' wives, and not just pastors, but whatever clergy, rabbi, priests, whatever your particular religion happens to be. But at least as far as just different situations that I'm aware of within the church world, you have people coming to pastors and talking to pastors, and then there have been some lawsuits. Well, you weren't really trained to help me. You gave me bad advice. Yes. And there's just a whole liability that's placed on the clergy that are trying to help people, and there have been a lot of lawsuits that have come out of that, especially with the one-on-one type of counseling. So that's why you see more and more of these different counseling centers popping up. I know at least within the Christian or within the evangelical circles, there are these Christian counseling centers that are popping up everywhere, trying to take on the role of what pastors and pastors' wives used to do, but are unable to do so now just because of the very litigious society that we live in.
Yes, very true. Yes, and the other thing I wanted to say is that in the very past, like maybe ancient time, when the priests and clergies didn't have much of any power in the societies, there were wise men, and usually an older wise man or wise woman in a tribe or in a, let's say, very primitive society, like before the cities, human being and primitive men used to live in caves, possibly. It started from then. The grandma or grandfather of the tribe used to be the wise person. If somebody in the tribe had any problem, used to go there and just talk to them. And talking is very important. That's the same method that Sigmund Freud actually used, asking the patient laying on the couch, just talk, and that brings us to this point that lots of these so-called disorders can be healed by very simple techniques. One of them, a person that you can go and just talk, either a pastor or
a friend,
or a coach or whoever. Number one. Number two, you need to take fresh air every day. Yes, most rich people and successful people take a walk for 20 minutes or 30 minutes every day. In the past, aristocrats usually do that through riding a horse, but not everybody has a horse nowadays. But getting fresh air is very important, especially getting sunshine is very important, because actually sunshine has an effect on your pineal gland, which we didn't know until now. But pineal gland actually produces certain hormones that works on your